So what influence does open source have on publishing now?
Well, quite a few influences. I mean, first of all, you got to remember that there's a lot of topics out there in the open source space that we cover in the book publishing world. But beyond that, I think open source as a movement has really inspired us as publishers and authors and just content creators in general to look at creating content in an open format and encouraging the community to come in, comment on it, help shape it, whether it's crowdsourcing or just adding that sort of commentary to it.
Right. So what sorts of tools are actually being used? I'm thinking of things like WordPress.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. And I would say one of the nice things that we're seeing is WordPress is a great example. Google Docs actually is another terrific example. But there's so many lightweight and flexible tools out there that are being kind of stitched together into broader solutions. And I think that's where the future is heading, is instead of these monolithic internal tool chains that everybody has built over the years, to try to find the best pieces and parts that are optimal at what they do and stitching them together to make something that's more powerful than the individual pieces on their own.
Now, there was a newspaper that actually did that recently where they used WordPress and Google Docs to completely reboot their CMS. Do you think that a major book publisher could do something similar to that for their content chain?
Could they do it? Absolutely. Will they? I think that there's probably too much of an investment with major publishing houses to maybe take that step, and they're probably trying to justify that investment. So I think the more likely scenario actually is more of a startup doing something like that, because it's a lightweight model that doesn't require much of an investment.
Do you feel like publishers are still, too many of them are still defining things by the container, whether we're talking about a book or an ebook?
Yeah.
Is that thinking still pervasive?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I mean, today, it's interesting. I always like to say that, use this analogy, that the early days of TV were nothing more than radio programs in front of a camera, right? And I'm convinced that's where we are today. If you look at ebooks, they are largely just quick and dirty conversions from that print format. And I think as soon as maybe even 2 or 3 years from now, particularly with EPUB 3 and the impact it's going to have, we're going to kind of look back at this era and say, wow, that was just barbaric, basically.
Sure, barbaric, absolutely. So last question for you. You were at Mini TOC Portland yesterday. How did that go, and what takeaways did you have?
It went phenomenally well, and just to let folks know, Mini TOC is just an outgrowth. It's a regional event based on our bigger Tools of Change conference. We had several people from the Portland community, almost 70 actually in attendance, publishers, authors, students in the PSU grad program. We had 9 speakers that talked about everything from DRM and licensing to just content creation, print on demand, everything under the sun. It was great because there were so many sessions there that effectively could have been done at any one of our TOC conferences like in New York, but many of them were also very regionally focused, okay, and appealed to this Portland audience. And so this is the first of what we feel will be many mini TOCs going forward that are kind of bubbling up from the community itself.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Mac.